Well, I am joined this afternoon by Dr. Jim McDonald of the Rhode Island Health Department. Doctor, thank you as always for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much. Good to be on board again.
Yesterday at the governor's weekly press briefing, my colleague Anita Buffoni asked about Halloween, a big topic of discussion among many Rhode Island families. The governor seemed not quite sure what the plan will be yet, but she says Halloween will have to happen in some form or another. So as a doctor, what is your medical advice to folks? Are little ghouls and goblins going to be able to go door to door like they normally do on Halloween?
I think we have to think about it, but I think it's possible to do that, right? When I think of trick-or-treating as a kid, it was a positive life experience. And by the way, I was already wearing a mask. So I don't think that's going to be a hard thing to add into the equation is wear a mask under your Halloween mask. One of the things that we're going to do, because I've given this some thought in the McDonald family, is we have a front porch. Not everybody does, but we have a front porch. We're going to put a table on there and put the candy bars out there one at a time, out there. And so ask a little sign, please take one. I think that'll work pretty well. I think other things you might do to make trick-or-treating safe is send your little trick-or-treater out there with some hand sanitizer. Why not, right? And, most of us are going to have our hands free. I think the other thing that's important is, when we go out trick-or-treating, if you're not from the same household, you want to be 6 feet apart from each other. But you can still do that. But trick-or-treating is generally an outdoor phenomenon, and I think that's a positive thing. If you're going into apartment buildings, I think we have to think about how that's different, because one of the things that you might want to do if you're someone who lives in an apartment is, can you put something outside your door so people could just simply take one without them reaching into a bucket where common hands would touch? I think when kids go trick-or-treating, when they get home, I would just make sure the hands are washed. And I think as far as trick-or-treating goes, it's supposed to be a positive life experience for kids. And I think what we want to do is the way to make it a consistently positive life experience. So I think there's a way to do trick-or-treating and do it commonsensically and do it safely.
It sounds like for the adults who might be the ones passing out candy, you're recommending not to stand there and do it in the traditional way, but maybe trust the kiddos to only take one if the bucket is left outside.
Yeah, and I think people can do that, quite frankly. It'll just be a little bit simpler for people. If you put a little table out, for a card table at work, could be something simple, maybe a little bucket, just something that works for people. And, I think most kids don't go alone. There's usually an adult with them. I recommend little kids have an adult with them when they're trick-or-treating. And I think people get the idea of, please take one.
One of the questions I wanted to ask is something that just caught our attention today. Barrington Public Schools telling parents in a memo that they are now implementing a silent snack period and a silent lunch. They say part of the reason is because of guidance from the Department of Health. So is this guidance that the Department of Health is encouraging for school districts to implement, and why?
Yeah, so I think what's happening is people are interpreting other guidance we're giving them. I'm not aware of us saying you can't talk at lunch. What might be the concept, though, that people are using is, remember, we're worried about people spreading viral particles. And we spread viral particles more commonly when we're talking or when we're singing. So that becomes a more high-risk experience. So that's why the silent snack might be an intervention that some schools might choose to do. No school is required to do that. That's up to them.
Do you think that's a realistic thing to ask kids not to talk at lunch?
I think we're in a different time in our history as a people. And I think one of the things I keep thinking about is, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And if we're not willing to live differently during the pandemic, we're doomed to perpetuate it. So I think if you look at organizations trying to do different things, what I would just say as a parent, it's probably best to just support that different thing, explain to your child that there's something different going on, and that's why we're living differently. One of the things we're all learning during the pandemic is we're all living in this context of rules, and everybody has rules thrust upon them. We do too at the Department of Health. And what I have found is you can either accept them and move on. And I think if you understand why there's a rule, it's a little bit easier to follow the rule.
One thing I was just hoping you could reiterate for us, Dr. M, what happens as we start to see more cases pop up in different districts, at different schools? What happens when a child or staff member tests positive for coronavirus, and how soon can they come back into the building?
Yeah, so what we're going to find out with this is the kids are learning to get COVID the same day. And that's one of the nice things about what's going on right now is we have rapid testing available. But they're going to need to be out of school for at least 10 days. Because you have to be fever-free for at least 24 hours and all your symptoms have to be improving. and we don't want anyone going back to school sick for any reason. So one important caveat is we don't want rushing anyone back to school with COVID, but we really want to remind people we don't want anybody going to school with even the slightest bit of illness. And I think, one of the things that's really common is, and this is true for all of us, denial is something we all go through at times. It's a very common phenomenon in health for people to deny symptoms. Older men like myself will get chest pain and say it could not be a heart attack when that's obviously what it could be. I think one of the things about COVID in children in particular is it just starts with a new cough or a new runny nose. It's so mild. I think as a parent, your first response is, well, it could not be COVID. And that's a normal, understandable response. But what we need folks to do is call that 844 number and arrange for COVID testing that day. What's nice about that is you get peace of mind that day with a yes or no answer. And if I'm a parent, that's high value to me.
As we head into flu season, you mentioned the symptoms of COVID and sort of maybe being dismissive. Oh, maybe it's not that. Runny nose, that comes with the flu, that comes with COVID, that comes with allergies. So what do you say to parents who are going, I'm not quite sure what's going on with my child?
Yeah, so I think it's important to say if you're someone who's always had allergies and your allergies are just starting, I would still have a COVID test done because I wouldn't assume it's from your allergies. However, influenza and COVID, they do look pretty similar in the beginning for some people. And quite frankly, you're probably going to need to be tested for both. And in the past, what we might have done is said, oh, I've got the flu, I'm just going to stay at home and not bother anybody. And I get that. You know what I mean? That makes sense. Now we can't do that. What we need to do is say, well, if it looks like we have the flu, we better be tested for both. And, flu season usually comes for us in Rhode Island in December, January timeframe. One of the things I'd be thinking about right now, even in the middle of September here, is I'd be marching over to my pharmacy or doctor's office and asking, when's the flu vaccine coming in? Because I'd like to get myself set up for that. I would love to see 90% of us have the flu vaccine this year. That's way more than we've ever had before. We usually average about 55%, but if we get 90%, we would see a big health improvement in this state, and that'd be a positive for all of us.
On the topic of vaccines, yesterday there was a lot of buzz because the CDC director said, quote, I might even go so far as to say that this face mask is more guaranteed to protect me against COVID than when I take the COVID vaccine. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm not really sure where he's coming from with that, to be kind of honest with you, Kim, because quite frankly, we don't have a vaccine yet. And as the new vaccines that are in research trials, we have to learn about them. We just don't know how effective they're going to be. I can't speak for Dr. Bedfield. What I would say, though, is I think one important point that I would agree with is a face mask is really important. And it's how I show you that I value you, that you're worth it, that I'm going to protect you. So I think that was the overarching message. I couldn't help but notice it got politicized in the national media, and sometimes it happens. And I think just to keep it straight, face masks are really important. If a vaccine gets approved, if there's one that's safe for you, I will be happy to share news about it. I will tell you all about it. I'll explain to you why it works and what are the side effects, if any. But if we ever get a vaccine, I look forward to talking about it so you know whether or not you want to get it or not. Right now, I don't think people can even make a decision about it because there isn't one out there. There's 3 that are in phase 3 trials, and that's good. That's very good. But we have to see what the research shows, and that's just quite frankly going to take time. One of the things I remember about doing research, it's 99% perspiration to get that 1% inspiration.
Dr. Jim McDonald from the Rhode Island Department of Health, always a pleasure speaking with you, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Kim, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye.